Welcome to the Education Innovators Podcast. I'm Eric Byron, and it is my privilege to host this show where we get to talk to folks from all over the world who are education thought leaders and innovators. We are going to hear inspiring stories from educators and edtech founders and AI experts and others who are fearlessly innovating and delivering unique learning experiences. I'm glad you're here. Let's get started.
All those pairings, that's to me, that's one of the key ways to get stuff done right now. And the thing that I was able to leverage a bit through White House is meeting a lot of people in philanthropy, meeting a lot more people in education, and just like trying to make those connections. It seemed like that's just one of the most fundamental things for this space. When we keep talking about what a collaborative thing it is to build a game like this, like you just got to meet these people. You've got to meet as many people as you can.
This is part 2 of my conversation with Mark DeLoura. In this part, we're going to talk about how hard it is to make educational games. And Mark shares great insight about how to pull the right people together and to collaborate. And that when we do that, we can really make magic happen. Keep listening.
I think that the finances can hang people up. I think, at least here in the US, pretty frequently is like, you have an educator who's passionate and wants to have some experience from the classroom, and then maybe they approach a developer and they find out that the kind of numbers we're talking about is a little bit, gives you the willies.
Yeah. No, it's not easy. So let's talk about the size of the market. We've been talking a little bit about, you got to make money and stuff. So I did go out and I pulled some stats, but it's hard to look at the numbers right away. I think it says, what are my numbers? What did I find? It's a $9 billion industry at the moment in serious games, the global market. The majority of that is in the US, but it's projected to grow to 32 billion. So from 9 billion in 2022 to 32 billion by 2030. So kind of exploding. But their definition of the serious games market, really is, well, the big player there is defense, right?
Oh yeah,
simulations and stuff, right? That's where a lot of that money flows, is in that space. Which brings me to another question of kind of survival in this marketplace, right? Is it a good idea to say, oh, I want to do games for like K through 12, but to survive, right, reduce my risk, I need to also be doing some stuff for the professional simulation and training, because it's similar skill sets in development, just a very different target audience, but maybe easier to make some money there. They'll de-risk your 12 or whatever adventure.
Exactly right. I've been kind of collecting business models for studios that seem to survive. And that's the one thing they seem to have in common is definitely like diversification. You look at somebody like Shell Games, Shell with a C, SCHELL Games, and they kind of go back and forth. They'll do an entertainment game, they'll do an educational game, they'll do like an informal education game, they'll do something a little more, K-12y. They go back and forth, and they support 100 some people. They're probably one of the more successful ones out there. Then you see somebody like Filament Games. Filament's near Madison, Wisconsin. They have a smaller staff. They make maybe smaller games, but they're really super laser focused on K-12. But they really diversify the way that they approach it. So they just finished a Roblox game. I saw they just shipped the game on Quest. They do stuff in partnership with like public broadcasting stations. Really interesting grants from government. But really what it comes down to is you can't put all your eggs in one basket because you never know which one's going to work out. Which is hard if you're a small studio. It's just it's difficult, right, to be that diverse. So challenge. But what else are we going to do? We're bored, right? We're making interesting things. If we didn't have challenges, we'd be dead.
Well, that's true. And, and I personally find that, all of these things are, so often it's my own personal experience, right? And I've heard game designers kind of talk about it this way. It's like, there's this thing in me, I've got to get it out, right? I've got to make this thing, right? Whether anybody ever wants to buy it or play it or it's ever successful, I don't know, but I got to do it, right? I've just got to go and build this thing and see what happens with it. And so, but to me, you've got to have you don't survive long as a business, right? If you're just doing
Yeah.
these passion projects that don't really amount to anything. So you've got to have that mix and really understand, oh yeah, I can sell this. I know I can sell this. Let's build that, right? It's a pull.
Yeah.
Somebody's asking for it,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Let's go do that. And then
Yeah.
on the side, we do our passion project thing and hope that, you know, that's the next, Angry Birds.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, the thing that I hope all the time is to find those people who are passionate, find a way to
Yeah.
keep them excited, and then have them like meet here. You meet this person from X and Y
Yes.
Foundation who's interested in that topic to make, wants to make a financial literacy game or whatever. Like, you guys meet up, go.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
those pairings. That's to me that's one of the key ways to get stuff done right now. And the thing that I was able to leverage a bit through White House is meeting a lot of people in philanthropy, meeting a lot more people in education, and just like trying to make those connections. It seemed like that's just one of the most fundamental things for this space. When we keep talking about what a collaborative thing it is to build a game like this, like you just got to meet these people. You've got to
Mm.
meet as many people as you can. You never quite know when the
Yeah.
matchmaking is going to happen.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
another thing I see happening too that I think is influencing this market space and the openness for educators to look at games is the games for change genre, if you will, now,
Mm.
right? It's a whole segment. In fact, you were on the board, right, for Games for
Yeah.
Change, and we see a lot of this now in the climate space, right? So, in fact, do you know Clinton Whittle? Clinton Whittle?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Clayton, sorry, Clayton Whittle. Apologies to
Oh,
Clayton.
wait. No, that's a
Clayton
familiar
Whittle.
name.
Yeah, Clayton Whittle. Yeah, he was on the show also, and so he's very much in that space. Did a PhD on how to use games not just to educate, but to drive action, behavior change, right?
Perfect.
And
Yeah.
so, but what I'm seeing is I think it's a wake-up call for some educators because there's still a lot of educators out there who see games as, oh, this is a distraction, this is, violence, and it's all Grand Theft Auto from their perspective, right? But then they encounter a game that teaches, environment and, climate and action and, is a healthy, you know, really good experience for kids in a very G rated or PG rated, kind of game. Some of these great narrative stories. Oh, there's another guy who was on the show, Simon Engerer. He's got a company that does workshops and I don't know how to describe his product, his services, but he does writing, English writing here in Hong Kong using games. So they
Huh.
use these great narrative games, have the kids play the games, and then write about the
Oh,
stories from the
perfect.
games, right?
Perfect. That's great.
But it
Yep.
but what I love about it, and this is the same thing with the games for change, right? It's this kind of eye-opening thing for some of the teachers to go, oh, some of these games are beautiful and, really enriching to play them. They're not all violence and zombie attack, whatever stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think this is helping also break down some of the barriers um, to folks.
Yeah.
Thoughts
Yeah.
on well, you
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
really in that, very involved in the Games for Change. What's going on today in that space?
Yeah. I think climate change is one of the big ones, like you said, and the Sustainable Development Goals, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals
Mm,
related stuff. So aligning games with the Sustainable Development Goals is super interesting because you're trying to motivate people into action for the development goals. And so if you can build a game that motivates people to action on one of those areas, fantastic. I think talking about some of these things in the abstract can be really dry sometimes. Like I want to make a game about these UN policies. Yeah, that'll be great.
woo-hoo.
But then I think about a game like the game that always jumps to mind for me for climate science right now is so not a climate science game, and it's this game called Alba. It was made by the people who made a really popular game called Monument Valley. It was purely an entertainment game, really stylish mobile game, beautiful, pretty popular. And they made Alba, which did not look anything like Monument Valley at all. So this may be an example of somebody making something super entertaining and then something a little more educational. In the game, you play a 10-year-old little girl on an island, and people have polluted the island. There was a nature preserve, and it's kind of a mess. And yeah, you just as the kid, you're like, just picking up trash and you're, saying, "Hey, you want to help me, clean up this sign?" "Oh, okay. I need somebody's help to do this. I'm going to put up a little sign. Maybe somebody will come help me, clean up the beach or whatever." It's
Yeah.
all done really in a light way. And it's just a fun, kind of joyful experience. And I didn't think about it as anything to do with climate or anything. I just thought I was having a fun game
Yeah.
until I finished the game and I caught myself one day going for a walk and saw some trash on the ground and was like motivated to just pick it up because that's what I did in the game. It's,
Right.
oh, there's trash. You just gotta pick it up. No, like, not even think twice about it. I was like, you got me. This is a
Yeah.
perfect like game for change. I don't know if they intended it to be that way, but it's such a lovely game to experience. And I recommend anybody to play that. And, games for change, there's like the whole span of something super light with, kind of light educational content is mostly just a fun experience to something that's way more hardcore. Like the Wilson Center just came out with this, oh shoot, what's it called? It's a microplastics focused
Mm.
game, but it's about government policy. And so in the game, you're choosing policies, and then you get to see the impact of those policies on things.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And so it
Seen
looks
some of
like,
those. Yeah. Right.
yeah, there's a couple. This U.S. State Department has made some as well. There's a game called Cat Park. Super interesting, like policy focused stuff. So a little bit more hardcore. That's what's great is like we can have this. I think when you're talking about which ones people will pay for, it's a little more difficult. Things that are lighter and more entertainment focused with light amount of educational material, much more likely to be able to sell in a marketplace. Things that are more hardcore, maybe less likely.
Yeah. So another thing came up in my research here this week. I stumbled on something called the Learning Games Network. Are
Yeah,
you familiar with that?
Learning Games Network. Yes.
So, so for me, it went towards this idea of, instead of the one-offs, right? So if I've got this one game, instead of me going and trying to negotiate with, 1,000 different schools, I put it on this network. So it's in kind of a marketplace where the educators can come and go, oh, I like that one. I like this one, right? And it's kind of easier shopping experience for
Yeah,
educators
yeah,
when when they're looking for games. So I thought
yeah,
that was an interesting. I have no idea how well they're doing. It looked like they had maybe 20, 25 different game experiences on there. Not sure
yeah.
who's developing them, but are you aware of any other ones like that? That
I think that there have been a few over time that have taken a crack at this. I was part of one kind of during the pandemic. It was called Games and Learning. They're trying to reboot again. We were pretty much that, a storefront where people could come and
okay.
get information about learning games, kind of directed at parents so they could choose wisely, for their kids.
Hmm.
Glass Lab kind of did that. Glass Lab, at the end of Glass Lab, they were bringing in third-party games as well. And so they had maybe a dozen games on the platform. And I think people have talked about Steam for learning games for a long time. I think inspired by there was a game called Physics with Portal. It was probably 12, 13 years ago. So the game Portal, the entertainment game Portal,
Hmm.
um, Valve had made an educational version of it that taught physics,
Cool.
and people saw that and were like, but in order for educators to access physics with Portal, they had to download Steam, and Steam is a very entertainment focused marketplace. And they're like, wouldn't
Yeah.
it be nice if there was a way for us to just have an education focused marketplace? So for you people have taken shots at this over time, none of them have really managed to hold on. I'm thinking of a couple more in my head. I mean, I'm a big fan of this as a concept. Like, this seems like an interesting way to get to scale. And if you can make a marketplace that is accepted by educators, then that makes life so
It's
much
the
easier
App
as a
Store for
developer.
game, for
App
education
Store,
games.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. Because getting in the App Store now, like the App Store, if you're going to go to iOS or if you're going to go to Android, either of those app stores, like you have to have marketing muscle to compete against everything else that's out there, right?
Well, and because there's an app for everything, trying
Yeah,
to find something on there too, right? If you're just
yeah,
searching, yes, finding a
yeah.
good educational game on there, how would you know it was a good educational game, right?
Yeah, there's no like, ability to teach 3 stars, or that doesn't exist.
Right, right. Yeah. So, well, all right. So there's an interesting topic too. Let's talk about that. So
Yeah,
this is another part of the dilemma I found with trying to get anything into education, right? Is efficacy,
yeah.
right? Really
Oh yeah.
demonstrating. So it's one thing to have this great experience and, maybe it's changing behaviors or whatever, but how do you measure that, right? Because a lot of, and this is, I've had listened to this pushback from a lot of educators, right? That I can't do it. I can't justify this unless I see the research and, peer reviewed, academic
Yep.
study of this that says it really works, right? So how do we get
Right.
past that, kind of
Yeah.
problem
Yeah.
too
Yeah.
with the measurement, the assessment? Because I think games have tremendous potential for assessment because you can collect so much data about the gameplay and how much time they spent here and doing that and whatever. So
Yep.
anything you encountered, in your time there on that side of things and how you help game companies figure out how to demonstrate that the learning really happens in a game.
Yeah, yeah, it's a very insightful question. I appreciate you asking it. You're betraying how much you know about this
Okay.
topic to me, which I always enjoy. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I think about the market in a couple different segments. There's the informal learning segment. There's kind of K-12, and then there's higher ed. These are more formal. So for informal learning, something you maybe put out on Steam that has light amount of learning in it, I don't think you need assessment in there particularly, generally, because what you're really after is a fun game and some auxiliary educational material that comes along with it. Formal K-12 in particular is the opposite, right? For like it's exactly the problem that you say, where a teacher is very busy. They're looking for maybe a tool that can fill in for them on this one day. Hit bullet point 9.3.2 on the right on the curriculum. This is what I got to teach today. Is there a tool out there that can help me with that? And how do I know that it works? And the way that they know that it works is that some accredited body says that it works. That's generally the easiest way to do it.
Yep.
Hard for the developer, easiest for the teacher. That's what they're going to look for. And I think a great example of that ecosystem working is the US Department of Education, the Small Business Grant Program, the SBIR program. Every grant that they give, and they give probably between 8 and 12 games a year, some money at different levels. They all have to partner up with like somebody like the Educational Testing Service, or West Ed is another one, to do that research. So
Okay.
the developer creates a game, they partner with this research company, they go out and test it. And then they can say, yes, this works,
Mm.
or this sort of works, or this doesn't work. And
Yeah.
now you've got something that you can go to teachers with and say, great, I can demonstrate to you that this actually works. Outside of that, I mean, these are the bodies that have a good reputation already with teachers. So you have to use them. You could try to go other routes and blaze your own trail, but you're gonna have different kinds of success with that.
Skeptics. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. When you do see other people get run down other roads, like having other teachers build these games, kind of like you're talking about in collaboration, I think that's another way to get credibility there. There was a game called Zombie Based Learning, as a teacher who built out it's like a, I always forget if it was a geology course or a geography course. I think it was a geology course, but it was all based around zombies. So, do you build your town on top of the mountain, or do you build your town in the valley? And why would you do that? If the zombies are going to come, if you're at the top of the mountain, you can't get access to water resources, but you're also far from the zombies. If you're in the valley, the zombies can't get to you, but now you have access to more resources. Like, what do you choose? So that, inspires the kids to learn more about geological features in the context of a zombie invasion. But that credibility, the fact that it was a teacher that built that helps as well. It's not like rigorous testing, but it's supplemental, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's another interesting observation I've had, over the course of the last 6 months doing this show is I have met several educators who really almost born out of frustration, right? So they've had this thing they just couldn't seem to teach well in a traditional
Mm.
setting, and they've gone out and gotten creative and developed characters and narratives or games, and then later decided, this now works so well, I need to share it, right? I need to create a business and make this available. I just had one on recently who did that with music. So she
Awesome.
was teaching music, had a little music academy school teaching kids, and her problem was the practice time, right? They'd have a great experience when they were in their lesson, then you'd send them home, and either the parents don't care, can't listen, don't know, right? The
Yeah.
kids distracted, they'd rather play a video game than do their piano lessons, right? um
Right, right.
and so she came up with a kind of gamified app that helps the kids do their lessons and their practice time at home, and they play the game and they're actually practicing. And it teaches both the instrument, and she has one that teaches music theory.
Oh,
So
nice.
to little kids, like 4 or 5 year olds, are learning music theory through the game,
Oh,
and it was brilliant.
I love
But
that.
anyway, but I love that kind of model too. And in the really successful ones that I've seen so far, like her, what you have seen is a great partnership, right? Where they had this creative idea and this concept, but recognized I don't have all the skills to build this, deliver it, make it fun, whatever. And so they brought in the folks that could help them do
Oh, that's
that.
great. Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, I think I had mentioned to you Colleen Kelly with the comic books that teach
Yeah.
chemistry. Brilliant, just absolutely phenomenal, thing that she did there. But that was from 25 years of teaching college chemistry. And yeah, she developed these
Oh, that's
characters and they
amazing.
turned out to be so great and, thoughtful and interesting that, to say, fourth graders are learning college chemistry from
Yeah.
her comic books. It's
This is what you want, right? It's you're like
yeah,
that 25-year teacher to like distill down what they've learned about teaching effectively and then spread it to develop
yeah,
to other, teachers. Do
yeah.
you know about Joel Levin? Is this a name that's familiar?
It sounds familiar.
So he
Joe Levin.
did Minecraft EDU, the version that got bought by Microsoft that turned into Minecraft Education like
Okay,
proper.
that's right.
So
That's where,
Joel
right. Yes, I had.
Teacher Gaming was the name of the company. So it's
Yeah.
kind of a similar story. Like he was using Minecraft to help him in the classroom and
Yep.
realized, more and more teachers thought it was interesting. And then Microsoft took it over. And this it's an interesting model too. Like Microsoft has done a great job of keeping Minecraft education going and partnering with people to generate curriculum in different subject matters.
Mm,
That's all takes place inside of Minecraft education, so
yeah.
that a teacher can download one tool, Minecraft Education, and have access to a whole bunch of different subjects that they could take a
Yeah.
crack at. Like
Yeah.
that's super interesting.
Yeah. Which also, I mean, another aspect of this for me is that not all games have to be designed as education games to be effective in education, right? Like
Yeah,
Simon Engineer, his Cicero group, what they're doing those are all just off the shelf, right? They're using commercial games that are designed for entertainment, but using them in an education setting really, really effectively, and we see, well, even Minecraft, right? I mean, this is,
yep,
an example, SimCity, I mean, there's so many examples of games that were not created necessarily for education purposes, but can be used that way by a clever educator who says, all
yeah,
right, this is engaging and it's relatively safe. Of course, Paul, Paul Darvasi too,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Paul did his PhD thing around the actually GTA, Grand Theft Auto, right? The one absolutely you would not want to bring into the classroom, but he did some very interesting kind of study of the kids and the attitudes and biases from the game, and just getting the kids to really talk about it. So we didn't get them to play the game. They were already playing the game, but just getting them to talk about what the game was teaching them, because you learn from every
Oh
game you
yeah,
play, whether it's
right,
designed for educational purposes or not. You're
right,
learning
right, right.
something, right? You're learning to kill the zombies or stay alive or, you know, yeah,
Yeah, how do we choose the thing that
connect the
teaches the
connect
thing
the
that we want?
three candies, right? Yeah.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah, you're learning something, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, always. Yeah, every experience teaches you something. How do you choose the one that is the one that is the thing you want to learn? Is
yeah,
a
yeah,
really interesting question.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
there's a lot of games like that. The one of the questions that I always find myself falling back on is, there are games like Minecraft and Civilization and Fortnite and Roblox, and how do we make it easier for teachers to build these kind of tools instead of talking about you're going to go partner with a game developer and da 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 da. Like, can I make tools that make it easier for the teachers to do this on their own or with like a lighter amount of lift on their part to create a prototype experience or something?
Yeah.
How do we do that? Yeah, the Roblox tools I think are still a little bit impenetrable. The Fortnite tools I find the same. Like it needs to be made a little simpler.
Yeah.
Like in between Scratch and Roblox, there's
Yeah.
something, right?
So, Mark, it's called generative AI.
I know, right?
Right?
Yeah, it's true.
It's out there now, right?
It is.
So,
Yeah, that's right.
well, well, yeah. I mean, we could talk a little bit about that. I know we're almost at an hour here, but it's well to me, this is a game changer in
Mm,
that aspect of well, not only the kids kind of partnering with, a chatbot or whatever to do kind of creative, things, but, it can really help a teacher come up with game ideas, right? And
Yeah,
just banter it back and forth and go, oh, I want to teach this. I want this element. What would be fun? Can you give me some visuals?
it's true.
Yeah,
Yeah,
songs, audio, whatever, right? It can really, really give you that lift. I think back on the ones I did for the Poly U, right? So, now did I did everything, right? I coded, I designed, I did the writing, I did the graphics, I did the sound effects,
woo.
the animations. I had to do it all. And I am not an artist, right? I'm like you. I came from the
Yeah,
engineering
yeah,
side of things, and I can't draw a stick figure, that
yeah, yeah,
looks
me too.
right.
Yeah, I hear
But
this.
I did the graphic. You know, anyway, I won't even embarrass myself with how I did most of the graphics. But now I think about it and I go, oh my God, if I had generative AI when I was doing
Yeah,
those projects, I mean, we could have made these things, way better. And the coding assistance thing, even though I can code,
yeah,
being able to go in and say use the well, they call it Copilot too, not to be
yeah,
confused with Microsoft, but right, kind of that coding assistant thing. It's just so much faster, right? Instead of me trying to go
yeah,
figure out, because I don't code every day, right? I've been
yeah,
in
yeah.
leadership for 20 years,
Right.
so
Yeah, yeah.
so when I roll up my sleeves and code, it's like, oh boy, my coding
Scraping the
skills
rust
are
off.
not modern here. Yeah.
I hear
uh, but I have done some stuff recently, just some Python coding or whatever, and yeah, you just go, oh yeah, I could go look this up, or I can just say, Pi.ai, what's the Python for this,
you. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And it just gives it to you, and you go, oh, that was so much easier than me hacking my way through that.
Yep, yep.
Yeah.
Even if it's, I love talking about generative AI lately because I've been using it in like a couple different ways from the perspective of a programmer, like you're talking about using Copilot. Also, I've been using it kind of as I'm learning Japanese, and so
Mm.
I've been using it as a place for me to experiment with learning about learning through AI.
Oh,
And what's remarkable to me is using it for coding. I can see when it does something wrong. When I do something with Japanese, it's unclear.
yes.
Sometimes I see it, but generally both of these things are languages, and these are language, LLMs they're based around language, right?
Right,
That's
right.
part of LLM. And so they're pretty good at both of those things. But you still kind of need a human in the loop once in a while as a sanity check. And I can be that human with coding, can't be that guy when I'm
Yeah.
learning Japanese. And so when we talk about using LLMs more in an educational setting, that's where I always go to. I'm like, okay, so how are we going to fix this? How are we going to solve this or mitigate it? Or I'm not sure. There's seeing the Chat GPT 4.0 announcement the other day, the stuff with Khan Academy and the Khan Migo, you see all sorts of amazing use cases and like love it, love it, love it, love it. It's so accessible, so many interesting ways to use it. And every once in a while, it's
Yeah.
not quite right.
Yeah.
I think about you using it as a coding copilot and how many, even when it gets something wrong, it's probably steering you in a direction that's valuable. And
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can, as
Well,
somebody who's done
and I
coding,
just
you can see it and
appreciated,
fix it.
yeah, yeah, like Pi, when you ask it for some code, it'll give you, well, and like I've had it, say, all right, give me a different example, maybe a different library, right? And but
Yeah.
it'll always at the end, it kind of gives a disclaimer and says you're probably going to have to tweak this, test it. It may not do exactly what
Awesome.
you want it to do, but what I found is
Yeah.
it helps set up some of the structure for me and go, oh yeah, yeah, right, yeah, that's a good way to call this, right? To structure this function, and in many cases just a library recommendation, right? It's just saying,
Right.
oh, you
That's
can
totally
use
what I
this
was
library
thinking.
or that library, and it's given me
Yep.
three options, right? And I just compare which is the best library for me in this use case. Yeah.
It's great
It
at that.
saves you
It's
so much
amazing at
time.
that.
It did it in
Uh,
seconds, right? So
There's a
yeah.
corollary to that I discovered, though. I'd be curious on your experience, which is I was trying to use at one point, it's an experiment again, trying to use ChatGPT and then GitHub Copilot is the two that I mostly use to write a program that would fold papercraft. So I was setting up
Oh,
structures, like origami, essentially, right?
yeah.
So I was setting up structures in memory that were triangles, and I wanted the triangles to fold around edges, and I wanted them to meet and become an edge, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah.
Yeah.
And I've done lots of 3D graphics, so I'm familiar with most of that. But I found it so hard to get it to help me apart from giving me library recommendations, the only thing I could figure is that like this is not a common thing somebody has written before. You don't really see this kind of weird use case, and so maybe there weren't examples that it could reference. I found
Well,
it to
and again,
really
it's a
not be particularly useful.
it's a
I
language
was
model, not
surprised.
a spatial, right? You're
Yeah,
talking about
that's true.
spatial logic there, right? Yeah. So
Yeah,
that could be part of, you got to teach it to do that, right?
yeah.
Train it to do that. Probably the more you do, the more, the
Maybe
better
more
it would
useful
get.
it would be.
Right,
I
right.
wonder.
Yeah,
Yeah, I should
yeah,
probably go back and finish it. I ended up, well, I shifted over to doing more Japanese
yeah.
stuff. So
All
that
right.
was my solution.
Yeah. And Mark, you are nerdy. I will say, yeah, doing folded
Yeah,
paper
maybe
code. Yeah, yeah,
that's
that's
possible. Yeah, that was during the, yeah. Yes,
uh
it happens. Once an
yeah,
engineer, always an engineer.
yeah. All
You
right.
know.
Well, so any kind of last comments, anything else you wanted to talk
Yeah.
about?
Well, I always like to end calls talking about games for learning, talking about games. So I'd
Okay.
be curious to ask you, what have you seen? What learning related games have you seen that you love? What are you playing? What are you interested in?
Oh, so God, there's been so many cool things I've encountered through this show. I thought one of the coolest ones was there's a company called Triceum. It's actually
Mhm.
a friend of mine, Andre Thomas, who came out of EA. He was a technical CG supervisor at EA, went to Texas A&M and ended up creating, first he created an art history game. So this was a
Awesome.
pull. The art history
Oh,
teacher
great.
kind of came to him and said, oh, these guys are just, everybody's just falling asleep in my class, but, you know, how do I make this more engaging? And he partnered with her and they created an art history game, which was brilliant. But then he went on and created really a triple A graphics kind of 3D game that teaches calculus. And
Whoa.
this was a heavy duty project, and they've got one version of it out. It's called Variant. Again, it's very cool. I can't really play it because I've never taken calculus, and it is not designed as a standalone. Oh, you can just go learn calculus playing this. It's designed to be incorporated supplemental in curriculum. Right. So you're taking
Got
a
it. Got it.
calculus class and you play the game on the side to reinforce what you're learning in your course. But again, they ran into this problem of it's one, they got one set out there, right, of lessons. And anybody who wants to incorporate this is going, okay, but it only gets me so far. I need like 3 times that much content to really make it worth the investment, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, it takes so long to develop really high end, content like that.
Yeah.
So it's been
That's true.
really, really well received. The people who played it are going, oh, this is brilliant. I want more. Right. So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So there's stuff like that out there. Well, you talk about the language thing. I've been
Yeah.
using Duolingo
Yeah.
to learn Mandarin.
Oh, wow.
So,
Good for
yeah,
you. That's awesome.
yeah. Well, it's hard.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Why do it? If it was easy, it'd be
Right, right.
boring.
Well, exactly, exactly. So, but so that was another interesting one, right? It's kind of gamified, but for me, that one's not a game.
Mm.
It's a quiz,
Ah. Yeah.
basically,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? It's the chocolate covered broccoli thing, right?
Right.
There's no question that this is just educational, primarily educational, and they've added some, little pop-up characters to go, "Whoo, great job," and
Right. Well,
I
do you
missed you,
find
or I'm glad you're
that
back.
part? So
Huh?
the gamification part of that, do you find that it keeps you motivated to continue learning and that you go and seek out other auxiliary things to like fill in the gaps that it's not hitting? So that is primary what it's like
Exactly.
primarily motivating you or
Right, right. No, I do. I like it. I think it's a very effective. It does have a little bit of AI in there in that
hmm,
it figures out where your confidence is. So, like, it's
nice.
teaching you these characters and phrases in Chinese. I'm sure you get the same thing in Japanese, but
Mm,
it
mm,
can
mm.
tell when you're confident. You answer quickly, or you hesitate, or you pick an answer, and you pick another answer, and then you finally hit submit, right? It seems to
Yeah.
detect all of that. And so what it does is when you're not very confident on something or you've just gotten it wrong, right? It grills you, kind of on that. It keeps bringing it back until you're
Uh,
very comfortable and you go, yeah, I know that character. Yeah, I got that one. I can say
Perfect.
that now, and you recognize, that character. So
Yep, yep.
I do like the fact that it does kind of the reading, the listening, and the talking. What
Mm,
it doesn't do is the writing. So for
right, right,
me,
right.
I'm very visual. I need to write the characters to learn them. So I use another platform, a tool called Skitter, I guess is how you
Hmm,
pronounce it. And that one really grills you on the writing. You have to pen over the lines and get the strokes in the right order and stuff, and
Perfect.
do them from memory in order to learn the characters. So that reinforces what I'm learning in Duolingo. So I'm using the
That's
combination of the two. So
It's funny for me to hear you say that because I did the exact same thing with Japanese. So I have an app called Kanji, learn
okay,
Japanese, and that's what it is. It's the same thing. You're learning the kanji by writing and getting the stroke order and all that. I
yep,
think one difference though, so Japanese on Duolingo, I use Duolingo kind of like my backbone of learning and
okay.
then inspiring me to go in other directions. There's no speaking in Japanese on Duolingo.
Oh, okay.
So, but there
Maybe you
are,
haven't gotten far enough in yet because it didn't
I'm
do it
pretty
initially.
far.
Are you? Oh, okay.
I'm like
Um,
650 days in now.
okay. All right.
Pretty good. I think
Yeah.
they just maybe haven't implemented it yet.
Huh.
Um, but what I love is generative AI. So there's an app that I've started using called Bunpo, means grammar, and Bunpo has a mode that will put you in a scenario, and it's just an open LLM chat basically. And they're like, okay, the LLM is going to pretend you're at the library, and it'll give you three goals. And it's, ask them where this book is, ask them what their favorite book is, tell them where you live. And then
Okay.
it just starts talking and you talk back. And then
Oh,
it monitors the chat to see if you've successfully done what is asked you. And when you've got those three goals completed, then the character says, well, nice meeting you. Thank you. Bye. And then it shuts the
yeah.
chat down. And then it rates everything that you've said and tells you whether it was like grammatically correct. And like,
Okay.
this is amazing. It's a
Yeah.
great example of using a,
Yeah.
LLM
That's
for this
fun.
kind of.
So another fun thing that I just recently encountered that I think has a lot of potential in the education space, although they weren't building it with that in mind. It's a Dungeons and Dragons style generative AI game. So it's an AI
Cool.
powered Dungeons and Dragons game. So what happens in this case is basically the AI becomes the dungeon master, right? And so, but it's all kind of prompting you. So you are really in the creative driver's seat, but it embellishes the story for you, right?
Mm. Mm.
So, it starts right out and says, what do you want to be, right? Who's your character, their name, your, race or whatever, right? And so you can just say, I don't know, what can I be, right? And oh, well, let me tell you, you can be an elf, you can be a dwarf, you could be a mage, you could be a bard, whatever, it gives you all these different, things you could be, and it helps you build your own backstory, right? But once it gets through
Nice.
that kind of initial piece, then it just says, so where do you want to go? Right? What do you want to do? And you say, oh, I want to go into the village and, look for magical items. Okay, and it builds this story, and it creates characters and
Awesome.
scenes, and drives dialogue for you, and you can even say, show me a picture of my character, right? And it gives you this halfling bard or whatever, right, with my magic flute, and it gives you a picture of me, right? And I go,
Oh
oh,
man.
cool, right?
What's this thing called?
It's called Casual Legends.
Casual Legends. Okay.
And I did a post on Facebook, and just kind of I'm in a Facebook group with like 400,000 educators, and I posted this thing and just said, would anybody be interested in trying this in the education setting? Because I think if you're
Yeah.
teaching creative writing, right, this is awesome. Because what I found almost immediately was it like unleashed my creativity, right? Because you want to give it like it'll do some fun things, but you got to keep kind of pointing it and suggesting things and saying, well, what if I meet somebody who, is also lost and, wants to, join me on this adventure, and they happen to be an elf ranger, and it goes, oh, okay. And off it goes and creates this elf ranger character for you.
Oh, I
And
gotta
it just
try
comes
this.
up with a whole backstory and stuff. Yeah. So yeah, Casual Legends, it's really fun.
That sounds
Um,
amazing.
and yeah, I'm now as an advisor and even an investor. I'm trying to help
Awesome.
them, really get
Oh,
this thing
great.
going. So
Good for you. Glad to hear
yeah,
it.
yeah. So that one's been fun. I've been playing it, regularly also as they're tweaking the model still. And yeah, well, that's been the other fun thing to watching them and just this constant change of the upgrades of the tools, right? And
Yeah.
you know, yeah, I mean, this most recent one with ChatGPT 4, just it's like, oh my God, it's like every week you give us better
It's
tools
better,
that,
better.
make the experience better, and it's faster, and it can
Yeah.
remember more stuff. Because that's one of the things, right? The further you get down your story, right? We started running into capacity problems there where it starts to
Yep.
forget details of the earlier parts of the story. And so
Yep.
it's not
Yep.
perfect, right? There's a lot of work going in, and we've got a small team building, around it, trying to figure out how to, you know, keep it more efficient and remember stuff and all of that. So yeah.
It's I love this using LLMs, using AI technology, modern AI technology inside of EdTech is I think has so many opportunities, so many interesting things happening. But the EdTech developers I've been talking to have been having a hard time figuring out how to make it cost effective.
Mm,
I think that's a challenge we're all going to bump into as we use this tool more and more. It's like you can when you have a small group of people playing the game, it's effective, but scaled out, now you've really got to your financial model has to be rock solid. That's always
yeah.
been challenging for us as a space. So I think there's probably a lot for us to learn over the next few years on that. You can use a smaller model, with more RAG like database stuff from memory. Will that's give you as good of an experience and it'd be less of a cost for me as a developer. Like we'll see. Stay
Yeah.
tuned, watch this space, and we'll all learn together.
Yeah. So, believe it or not, we kept talking for another 10 minutes or so, and I'm pretty sure we could have talked for another hour or two. Mark is a wealth of information and insight into how things really work in the educational game industry. This is why I do the show. The opportunity to share these kinds of conversations, with the community, and for me to learn from those who are thought leaders, and a finger on the pulse, and an ear that hears from all corners of the market. There's plenty of challenges in the education and educational game development, but it's folks like Mark DeLoura who help us see the path forward. If you're enjoying this podcast, and I pray that you are, please subscribe and share. We have more awesome guests lined up, incredible stories of innovation and education. So you don't want to miss them. Please join the community. I'm Eric Byron. Thanks for listening to the Education Innovators podcast. To all those education innovators out there, thanks for doing what you do. You are making a difference.